Hey everybody, welcome to Let's Pod This. My name is Andy Moore and I'm one of your hosts. Joined like every week by my two co-hosts, Miss Bailey Perkins. Hello.
Hello, happy Friday, everybody.
Happy Friday. And Dr. Scott Melson. Hello, sir.
What's up, man?
Scott, do you like the over-the-ear headphones more than the earbud situation?
I do. I'm an old soul, so.
And only old men wear. I have my over-the-ear, but it's constricting.
No, I don't know. I like the over the ear. I feel like it offers better noise canceling and it's comfortable.
Well, that's at least one of those is definitely true. Anyway, I digress immediately. If this is par for the course, listeners and viewers, you can tell exactly how this episode is going to go. So this is our second live episode to do live streamed on Facebook and YouTube and Periscope. Who even knew that was still a thing? If you are watching, great. Feel free to comment. We can see your comments and maybe we'll find a way to work them in as we go along. If you are listening to the podcast, thanks so much. If you're watching but not listening, you should definitely go subscribe so you don't always have to be here. We are going to start doing this live at 3 o'clock on Fridays every week, at least for the foreseeable future. We've been recording at 2, but that sometimes is tough for one or more of us to get there at the right time. So we're going to do 3 o'clock. Hopefully that is better for folks to watch as well. Okay, well, this week, man, when a quadruple veto override is the least significant thing that happened in the legislature in a given week, you know that session is almost over. And that's the case right now. This week, the governor vetoed the budget and 3 other bills, and the legislature moved very quickly to override all of those vetoes and issue a strongly worded statement that we'll discuss in a minute. Also, the legislature passed all manner of other bills that would do, almost everything. A quick sampling includes changes to the initiative petition process, a tax on campaign ethics rules, pay raises for judges, the big Omnibus administrative rules bill, which passed entirely just as it is, except for a couple of tweaks that they took out related to vaccines. They're debating an abortion bill as we record this, and I'm sure it'll pass. Permanently permitting curbside and delivery of liquor, which is arguably a good thing, particularly if they keep passing these other bills. And a cost of living increase for retired state employees. That is a good thing. And I will note, one of the only priorities that they said they'd be working on that they've actually worked on.
Yeah.
When we had Leader Eccles on early in the session, and so much more. So, also, as Bailey noted, today is officially the first day of phase 2 of the COVID-19 open back up our state policy, or whatever hokey name that it has. So effective today, you can go about your business, right? Like bars can open, restaurants, churches.
Sporting.
Yeah.
But what about like bowling alleys? Is that a thing that can open now? Really, anything. They said, yeah, like
I don't know. I'm just staying home, so I don't know where you're allowed to go now because I'm still trying not to go anywhere.
So the thing that's weird to me, and I mean, clearly, I think many of us saw the video or pictures from Kong's Tavern from a couple of weeks ago here in Oklahoma City.
How was that allowed? I don't understand how that was allowed. Well,
I don't think it was, but I don't think that law enforcement is enforcing things. Also, I mean, if you go to these things, you're taking a risk, right? Like not just for yourself, but for other people. I mean, we have seen in other states where people went to church or to choir practice, right? And that choir practice resulted in
killed people. The choir practice killed people.
Yes.
Well, there's a recent story as of yesterday where a nail shop has asked its staff and those customers who were visiting that day to quarantine because one of the employees was tested positive for COVID. So
you went to get your nails done and you caught the COVID potentially, right? Like, hopefully they were using other practices. Technically, I think Governor Stitt's thing is still, this is like phase 2 of opening back up, but the safer at home procedures are supposedly still in place, that you are safer at home. And if you go out, you're supposed to practice social distancing. You are supposed to wear masks, do that.
Are you supposed to wear a mask? Because like I know the CDC says that you're supposed to wear a mask, and like I know that like the doctors and other public health experts say that you're supposed to wear a mask, and like a big chunk of people that I see are wearing a mask, and like I'm wearing a mask like as a doctor, when I go out and see patients really do anything. But like the governor and the president seem like they don't have to wear a mask when they go and do stuff. So I'm
of members of the legislature too, right? Yeah,
I'm confused about what it is that we're supposed to be doing.
One of the press corps from the Capitol posted this might have been last week, but a picture of the sign on the door that says everyone must wear a mask. And then, oh no, it was Representative Andy Fugate. That's who posted the picture outside that everyone must wear a mask. And then a picture from the gallery of the floor, and not everyone's wearing a mask.
Because hashtag freedom.
Right. Well, yeah, I would prefer to remain free of COVID.
Corona, yeah.
It's funny. I was like preparing today, kind of thinking about like we're going to talk about, and it's like, it's the second or third to last Friday in May. I'm furious and disgusted with the legislature. We're about to record a show. This is like the most normal things have been in a while.
Right.
It's been a while since I've been completely just furious with the Capitol unless we sit down because they haven't been allowed to do anything. But now that they're back, now that they're back, they're in full stride doing horrible things. It's great.
But to that point, this is very typical of this time of the year for those who are involved in advocacy, especially in this election season, because lawmakers, whether there's a pandemic or it's just a regular day, they're pushing through as much as they can to get done, because some of them are terming out. Some of them are preparing to campaign. And so usually we see an influx of bills go through session anyway during this time. And so that's the one piece of normal that we're seeing. The bill in question, the abortion bill that they were just debating passed 76-18. So
just now.
Yep.
Yeah. I'm sure it was on party lines. That's pretty
close
to party line. Yeah.
I think there's like six people or so must have not voted for it, but
or they either didn't vote or
but anyway, so there you go.
All right. Well, man, what a week. What day is it? Friday. Let's so we'll talk through, I think, as many of these things as we can, but certainly not all of them, because we try to do this in an hour. But let's start with the ethics commission stuff, because I think that's super interesting, and then we'll end with the budget. So on Thursday, it looked like they were trying to pass a bill that would allow candidates to spend their campaign funds on personal expenses, not just campaign expenses, so long as they reported those expenses to the ethics commission, like everything else. So they could spend it on meals and clothing and vacations and whatever else. And then it caught a lot of press, right? It kind of caught fire on Twitter. Even the ethics commission was tweeting about it. And then House Appropriations Chair Roger Thompson pulled it. Senate, excuse me. Yeah, Senate A and B Chair Thompson pulled it and said, "It's just a joke. I'm just making a point." And then he did acknowledge in his statement that he feels like there's probably a better way to make the point.
Right, but he also said like this is a conversation that we need to have because the current ethics commission restrictions are unreasonable, And I'm just like, which ones? Like, which ones are you talking about,
Right.
bro? Like, what do you want to use the money that people give you to run for office? Like, what do you want to do with that money that you're not allowed to do with it now? Right? Like, is it restrictions on like lobbying? Like, I mean, what is it?
What? And
He said we need to have a conversation about this, and then stopped talking. So
didn't have the conversation.
So
and legitimately, maybe now's not the time, right?
Yeah.
I think, to me, whenever they fiddle with ethics stuff, it makes me feel icky. And I think a lot of voters feel that way too. Was it last year before last? Like, often the ethics commission will make their recommendation for their administrative rules, right? When they do this big thing and they're like, here's what we think the reporting requirement should be in the rules. And the legislature almost never adopts them. And often they will like cut those out and then also cut the ethics commission budget. Like right now it was cut significantly a couple of years ago. So they have very few staff, which means less oversight.
And it was out of sight. It wasn't even like a rational reason to cut them.
Right.
So
it's because they tried to pass new rules that restricted how the legislature can do things. And this isn't even the only ethics thing, like the action they've taken that would hamper the ethics commission this week. There's also House Bill 3613. So this is a bill that essentially would prevent state agencies from collecting any information that identifies a person as being a member, supporter, volunteer, or donor of a financial or non-financial offering financial or non-financial support to any entity organized pursuant to the 501c code of the U.S. Internal Revenue Service. So this means
C3s and C4s,
right? And so you have to the director of the Ethics Commission, Ashley Kemp, said that like if this goes into law and it's right now awaiting the governor's signature, they'd have to take down the public website that allows people to search records for candidates, campaigns, lobbyists, and political action committees. And it's like, and the justification for this. So you go and you ask the bill sponsors, right? And they say that this is Representative O'Donnell and Senator Kim David, that this is about protecting the privacy of citizens who belong to political organizations. Like, I just don't, you're allowed to, like, free speech says that you're allowed to belong to whatever you want and say whatever you want. Like, that's fine. But like, if you're embarrassed about the political causes that you support and donate to, maybe you should think about not supporting and right. Like this, as you know, my good pal from, what is it? King of the Hill? No, Family Guy says, it really grinds my gears. This really grinds my gears. Like this idea that we have to protect people's privacy from donating to political stuff.
Well, and it's tension among the idea of transparency in governance in the way that we are handling our business. And I think handling business includes donating and participating in the election process and in the political side of things. And so it's a little strange that in some areas we want to push for transparency and governance and who's involved and who's doing what, but on this end we want to protect people. So it's just a little confusing.
Yes. One bill that I think connects to this, they passed a bill, House Bill 3826. I think it passed both chambers, and it is a rather significant change to the initiative petition process. Should the governor sign it? I haven't heard yet if he did. This was just yesterday, the day before, so Wednesday or Thursday. It would change the actual signature form and like how the signatures are collected. So right now, under current law, the form itself that you sign, like a petition for a ballot initiative, is mandated to have 20 signature lines, to have the gist at the top, and it specifies what is supposed to be on that piece of paper. So this changes all of that. It would have fewer than 20 lines, I think, because they need space. And it would basically make it to be like a standardized form, kind of like a medical billing form, or one of those things where it has like little, the way it was described to me is like those little boxes where you put each letter in there.
I mean, medical
So
billing
that-
forms are known for their ease of use, and that
has a lot to do with just the healthcare industry as well. This is straightforward: name, address, date of birth. Like that's really all you got to put on there. But the goal is that the form would be scannable. And so this bill, House Bill 3826, authorizes the legislature, the election board to purchase software and equipment they would need to, not the election board, Secretary of State, so that they could scan in all of the signature pages and basically like automatically check them against the voter record. And in fact, the bill requires the Secretary of State to confirm signatures. So this is like a nuanced thing that I've just learned about, is that the current law is that when a campaign collects signatures, right? So you get 250,000 signatures and you turn them in, they do a spot check where they look through and make sure they're all like look valid. There's not Mickey Mouse and Donald Duck, or there's not a whole page that are all the same handwriting, those kinds of things that make sure they're all notarized. But they don't go through to make sure that every signature is a registered voter unless the opponent challenges the validity of the signatures. And my reading of this bill is that this would now require the Secretary of State to automatically confirm and validate all of the signatures as soon as they're turned in. It was couched as being a bill that makes signature challenges cheaper and quicker, which also means they're easier to do. But I also think that if the Secretary of State is automatically going to check, then there's no one's ever going to file a challenge because it's already being checked, right? Like the reason we have challenges now is because they're not always checked. This arguably also helps campaigns because most, ballot initiative campaigns want to know who signed their forms. And so they have like an army of volunteers that go through and read terrible handwriting and try to type it all into an Excel sheet. So this way, like campaigns could buy the software and machines and scan it as well, I guess. So there's a few other changes. Now, all of that to say, like, if so there's, I got mixed up. There's two bills. So 3826 is the one that changes the form to the initiative petitions. It had a partner bill, 3827, that changes how ballot initiative campaigns or like state question campaigns are run. The current law is that you file your state question or your ballot initiative, you go through this legal stuff, then you get to collect signatures, and then their signatures are validated, and then the governor puts you on the ballot. And at that point, once you're actually on the ballot, is when you have to start reporting stuff to the Ethics Commission. Now, you have to report backwards to the very beginning for when you first filed. So you have to just say that information, but it doesn't come out until the very end. So, presumably for like the Medicaid expansion campaign, the governor just put on the ballot a few weeks ago. So they didn't have to send anything to the Ethics Commission until just a few weeks ago. And that includes who their donors are. This bill, 3827, changes that and requires everything to be filed from day one. So it's being collected either way, but it's being filed from day one. So my question is, this is more in the weeds than we usually get, but if you've got one bill that passed first that says you have to report all this stuff to the Ethics Commission right away, including all the donations to you as a committee, which is a 501c4 most typically. Then they have this other bill that effectively says no state agency can collect information about donations to a 501c4.
To protect, yeah.
Right. I wonder what happens, right? Like I haven't talked to an attorney yet, but I wonder if that means that if they just undid what they were trying to do. Does that
On
make
the
sense?
one hand, we want to make it much harder for people to pass initiative petitions. On the other hand, drummed up concerns about privacy, which don't. I just, I can't. I want to subvert the will of the people in like so many different ways, and you can't do all of them.
Oh man, they also passed the bill about local control. I forgot all about that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Bailey, tell us about that.
Yeah, and so the way they worded it is in addition to it's a amended part of the emergency powers declaration, to where as long as that's in place, the municipal leaders have to get permission from the governor before they can institute anything that's in conflict with whatever the governor puts in place. And so it's a way for the governor to have cohesion around any of the declarations that he puts into place while he has this declaration of power. Because there was a lot of confusion a month or two ago, which feels like a year ago at this point, of municipalities saying, we have these stay-at-home orders and businesses can't open until XYZ, but the governor's orders say another thing. And so, but the governor's orders allowed for municipal leaders to have a say. So it's based on this is what the governor says you can do unless your municipal leadership says otherwise. And so now this clarifies to say that it's whatever is instituted by the governor or the legislature, and municipal governments need to get permission if they need to make changes. So
we want local government unless local government does something we don't like, in which case we want strong central government.
Well, this happens every year, right? Like there are bills that are like, we don't want the feds to be involved in Oklahoma. Like we want local control. This is about states' rights. And then as soon as any city in the state does something the state doesn't like, it's like, except for you guys, right? Like you can't ban smoking. You can't require these things. You can't, you
can't
have your own public health
you can't raise your minimum wage. Yeah.
Can't raise your minimum wage. Right. And so it's like, it's just right here. And so again, I feel like in many ways, the legislature is perpetuating the narrative, right? That they are special somehow, that the rules, the feds don't apply to them and the rules of the cities don't matter, that the ethics rules that the feds have don't apply to our state, that they want their own rules here. And they, even in debate this week, we saw a number of times where they said, this is about the legislature. In fact, Scott, talking about the administrative rules, right? Their argument, they kept trying to say, well, one member kept trying to say, this isn't about vaccines. This is about the legislature, and that this somehow the State Department of Health was circumventing the legislature by making their own rules. When in fact,
that's literally their job.
Well, the legislature passed a law to create the administrative rule process so that they don't have to make the rules, right? Like they're like, we oversee things, they have to approve them, but they have that on purpose. And so
this is ridiculous. We gave them the job and the power to create rules, and now they're doing it. And
they're doing it.
And it's the body that has like oversight by the governor. So that's another
so that's
thing that they passed. So
that's probably a good segue, right? Like into talking about things related to the budget in particular, is that I think we have seen several times this session, right, that the legislature and the governor are not getting along like they used to. And so I guess maybe nowhere is that more obvious than with the budget. So Bailey, walk us through what happened this week. I guess this was on Monday or Tuesday. It all started.
Yeah. So there were a couple of bills that the governor vetoed. And the legislature noted that if these couple of bills are gutted from the budget, it would create a $370 million hole that the legislature would have to fill with cuts, particularly cuts to education. So it was framed that if these dollars were removed in the way that they were approaching this veto, then it would mean like a 12% cut to education. There's also rumors that the governor didn't have conversation with the legislature through this budget process. And so there was frustration with lawmakers that the governor made that decision to make those two vetoes without having conversation about that happening. And so once the governor put those vetoes in place, the legislature came together in a rare way, because we don't see veto overrides, because veto overrides are difficult. It takes 3/4 of both chambers, the House and the Senate, to override a veto. And so the legislature came together, not just by chambers, but even by parties, and didn't override the governor's veto so that the budget would stay in place.
But I was typing our notes for today. I was like, "Is overrode? Is that a
right?
Is that a word?
It's
overridden.
No, I mean it's really. I mean, it's pretty crazy, and I don't know if this has ever happened before. That's one of my never-ending list of things to research and find out.
It's been a long time.
I'm currently on mid 2017 in terms of things I'm trying to research and see if they'd ever happened before. So I'll let you know in 2 years when I figure this one out. But it's I don't know. It was super interesting, and it's interesting because on the one hand, I feel like for the legislature to override the vetoes was a good thing, right? Like I think it was the right call given where we're at. However, I also think the governor's point in terms of his problems with the budget are not without merit either, right? Like, you know, it was because his point largely is, and I had to step away for a minute. So Bailey, if you talked about this and I missed it, I apologize. But his point is largely that a huge chunk of that budget next year relies on one-time funds, right? And he is saying you should not be writing a budget based on money that you don't know that's going to be there the year after that. And on the one hand, I think his point is well taken, and that's true. You shouldn't make a habit of like budgeting how you're going to pay for recurring expenses using one-time monies. You shouldn't do that personally. Then you shouldn't do that as a legislative body either. But at the same time, like the money's got to come from somewhere. I think that the legislature is counting on the federal government to come back and backfill a lot of these holes, which is what Representative Eccles alluded to a few weeks ago when he was on the show with us. To that point, I would encourage Representative Eccles to be in contact with all the members of Oklahoma's congressional delegation who voted against the bill today that would do exactly that. You know, and they all have different reasons. Or I think they all have similar reasons for voting it. This was one of those bills where Oklahoma's congressional delegation, just specifically in the House of Representatives, acted with unanimity. Representative Kinder Horn, as well as Congressmen Cole, Kern, Lucas, and Mullins, all voted against the third part of the coronavirus relief, the package that went before the House. But
it's about a $3 trillion bill.
Yeah, it's a huge bill, and there's some good stuff in it. There's a lot of good stuff in it, and in my opinion, there's reasons why they didn't support it. But a big chunk of that bill is $640 billion for state and local governments, and that's the money that I think the legislature here is counting on to fill some of these holes next year.
Well, so the real the real issue was that the specific bills, as Bailey mentioned, like dealt with pensions, right? And there was a lot of discussion of like they're not taken from the corpus, like from the money in the bank. They are going to not put as much in the bank for the next year. They've been making like double or triple payments to try to build
maintain
it up.
That solvency,
because and I think now it's like 70% funded, whereas I mean 10 years ago it was like 5% or something. It was almost insolvent, and so
we were way behind.
They've made some really good moves to get it up there, and they once they did. they're like, okay, well, maybe we don't make a double payment or a triple payment this year. Maybe we use that money to actually pay directly for education, with the hope, right, that like oil prices come up and things down the road.
Things get better.
Yeah. And so
we should play Living on a Prayer right here. Just put it.
Well, I mean, it's a valid rationality to it. It's just the circumstances of where we are don't allow us to make that decision. So it's a lose-lose situation almost in a way, right?
Well,
and like I said, I don't fault the legislature for overriding the vetoes, right? Like I think this was to keep everything as whole, or as close to whole as possible, and particularly Common Ed for next year, I think was, the right call, wanting to preserve the historic investment in public education that they made 2 years ago. That wasn't really an investment at all, but I digress.
It was historic.
Yeah, well, right. It was historic, but it is. This is not something you're going to be able to do year after year after year, right? If oil prices don't come back, if the feds don't backfill it, there's either going to be cuts or they're going to have to find the money from somewhere else.
Right. I mean, the truth is, like, this stuff sucks, man. Like, the government gets money one way, right? From taxes. That's the only way the government gets money. And everything in every sector of the economy is down, right? Like, and so that means less taxes for every level: city, state, federal government, and only one of those can print money. And it
needs something to back in order to print money. You can't just print random money.
But I mean, I've been nervous that like this is going to drive up inflation, and we've already seen like the price of gold drop because the dollar dropped, and all this stuff. So I think, it's important to recognize that things are bad across the board, and that means they've got to make tough choices. Now, what those choices are is up to them and, us as citizens to advocate. But their decisions to try to get through 1 year, I can see both sides of this, as we've discussed. However, like, the legislature as an institution does not have a strong history of like being proactive, and like they do have a strong history of kicking the can down the road, and that's what got us into the terrible fiscal position just 4 years ago when we also had a $1.3 billion shortfall.
I don't think that's entirely fair, Andy.
Why is that?
No, it's completely fair.
Well, and one thing I wanted to mention as like one of the
100% accurate.
Yeah. Well, one of the tough decisions that I wanted to raise too is they passed the measure that would cut the affordable housing credit from 4 million to 2 million. We have a significant poverty rate in the state, and we have a lot of people who rely on affordable or that Section 8 or other types of affordable housing programs. And so I worry that even cuts to that program will make it tougher for people to have a place to call home and that stability.
Yeah. But Bailey, they're going to increase the cap on the Education Opportunity Scholarship Fund credit. So that will make up, like, letting people donate more money for private schools will make up for cutting the affordable housing credit. Don't you think?
I mean,
it just gets, I'm sorry. I'm in a bad
it goes back to your point. Like, decisions, right? They could have kept that stable.
Right.
And put less into that scholarship fund. I mean, it's really about how you make decisions and what it means. And there's going to be consequences for that decision. It's going to hurt people in the long run. So,
it'll make it harder for people to get affordable housing, but at least those people who don't have affordable housing can send their kids to private school.
Maybe.
Scott is feeling cynical today.
Right.
I think one of the other interesting things surrounding the budget discussions, the veto and the ensuing override, it's certainly how they message around that, right? So Governor Stitt, I thought he had obviously had his team like help out with some of this messaging, and it was, I thought, pretty decent, where he said, I had no input on this budget, and so I didn't want to put my name on it. Like, whether or not that's the right thing to do, neither here nor there, but that on face value, like, makes some sense, right? Like, I don't want to sign a budget that I didn't have an input in, unless I totally approve of it, and clearly he did not, right? And that back and forth of who said what with the budget, he had
and his I am not a politician. So.
Yes, yeah, he said, I'm not a politician, so I don't really understand like the getting back at each other thing. And I don't know whether that's true or not. For him, I think that is a good statement, because that's the kind of thing that, like, voters get sick of that stuff too, man. Like, a few years ago, a representative who's no longer in office, like, openly said that they were not going to hear a bill because the author was rude to them in some meeting. And I was like,
that happened to one of the bills I worked on.
Like, you're an adult.
I mean, it's a good talking point, and it'll probably play well, but man, it is just like, I'm not a politician, so I don't understand how this works. You're the freaking governor. Like, you are in fact a politician. And
but like, by virtue of running for office, you became a politician
and being elected. Yeah.
And on the kind of a serious note, like, I'm not a politician, so I don't understand how this, like, get back at each other works. Like, the full story of this is that if you ask some of the legislators anyway, right, they would say that the governor and his representatives, or not even the governor, his representatives, walked into a room and said, we want these things, these are non-negotiable, and if you try to move on these, like, discussion's over, like, we're not doing anything. And the legislature said, that's not how this process works, and the governor walked away. Okay, so does not being a politician mean that, like, you don't understand how to have a conversation? Like, is that what that means? Like, I don't understand how this back and forth works. Have you not had, like, relationships with people? Like, is that like
junior high? Yeah.
Right? I mean, like, do personal relationships not matter in, like, the business world? Like, I don't.
We talked about this in previous podcasts, that the ideal that he has and the approach on the office is a CEO mindset. And when you look at yourself as the CEO of the state, you expect to be able to say, this is my vision, this is what needs to be done, and then it just happens. And when you have a co-equal branches of government plus a court system, that's not how government, or and even in what we've talked about in previous podcasts, you have other nations within your state that you have to work with. Like, he's learning that it's not as simple as I want to will it to be done and it's done. So I think he is learning what it means to be a elected leader among other elected leaders who have equitable power, and having to balance all that out.
Well, and part of leading, like, especially in a role like this, part of leading is bringing people together. Leading isn't saying, like, this is what I want, and if you don't give it to me, then I'm going to veto the budget and you guys own this because I think this is a bad idea. Like, that's not leadership.
Well, and so, I mean, a couple of things. One, a point of personal order. Scott said that the governor walked away, and I think it's been clear from him and others that he was physically not in the budget negotiations, which is a deviation from past years, right? Like, we've all seen photos of Governor Fallon when she was directly involved in budget negotiations, often with one of our oil and gas overlords on the phone, also involved in negotiations.
when the governor was negotiating the budget with the legislative leadership and then the CEOs of Continental and Devon.
Yeah.
as one does.
And they took a picture of it. Like, that's the kind of thing I'm like, why would you? Or she said, "Oh, he's
look at her."
I was like, "You didn't call me."
Look at her, hard at work, asking business communities permission to raise taxes.
Right. So we can, wax poetic on Governor Fallon's missteps some other time. The other thing I think is interesting, right, is that when about this year, 2020, lots of things interesting. Specific to Oklahoma politics is that it has been a huge civics lesson for all of us, and arguably for Governor Stitt too, right? Like, I don't know how politically aware he was or politically curious before running. He has said he's an outsider.
He said he didn't vote much.
He didn't vote, right? Well, I don't know if he said it, but it's public record. And yeah, he had not voted in a number of elections. And so there's a good chance that he was living life, running his business, doing the thing that most people do, right? Not everyone is doing podcasts once a week about state politics, just us nerds. So what we've seen this year, and Bailey and Scott, you both hit the nail on the head. We have separation of powers, right? So we've seen the state Supreme Court make a ruling about laws that the legislature passed, and the legislature subsequently passing new laws to deal with that ruling. We have seen the legislature pass laws that the governor vetoed. We've seen the legislature override those vetoes as well. I'm sure there's been some interaction between the governor's office and the Supreme Court, though nothing jumps out at me.
Well, there was almost one when the legislature sued the governor, and they were getting ready to have that meeting for the Board of Equalization.
That's exactly right. The legislature one branch used another branch to try to force the third branch to do something.
Yep.
That's exactly right. Wow.
And the governor has appointed 2 justices, right? 2, 3?
Yeah, that was all last year, wasn't it? At the end of last year.
I think
so. It all runs together, but like still interaction with the governor and the Supreme Court, like the influence that the governor has over the court that doesn't necessarily extend to their rulings, right?
Right. So that's like a perpendicular, parallel, sideways ruling, horizontal ruling or interaction, right? There's also the vertical civics lesson between city, state, and federal governments, certainly during this COVID-19 crisis, where we've seen that relationship and how it's not always smooth, right? Between what cities want or need and what the state wants or needs and what the federal government wants or needs or what they all think. And so everything from, a simple task like trying to order masks and gloves for someone to, more advanced issues of income and tax revenue and who's going to pay for these things and all that.
That's another thing that happened this weekend is that the legislature is asking questions like, hey, we can see you're spending all this money, but the state is not saying who they're doing business with. Like, that's
right.
Like,
and they said we're not going to sign off on and nominate the person that you want to run the State Department of Health.
Yes.
So it's a number of
this has been it's been a very busy week for a week that we didn't think was going to have that much going on.
Yeah.
All this essential budget only stuff that they're doing. It's pretty crazy.
Yeah. And then I feel like there was something else in there, some other civics lesson. Not that that's not enough, but I think we've seen, both the horizontal and the vertical relationships in government. And in some ways, like how we, the people, have a role and what happens when the government takes steps to limit our role, right? Which is not cool. Oh, that's a third thing I remembered. Is so not just within our own government, horizontally and vertically, but between governments. Bailey, you mentioned, our interactions with other sovereign nations, right? So aside from what we see about, China or other countries and how everyone's responding to this COVID crisis, but here in Oklahoma, we have several dozen Native American tribes that are sovereign nations, and so this discussion around the tribal compacts has been a big deal, with the Comanche and the Oto-Missouri tribes signing new compacts, new gaming compacts. The other tribes still negotiating and
did you see the other tribes kicked them out of the gaming
OIGA?
Yeah.
So the gaming association, which I get, right? Like if you're I mean, that kind of thing happened with oil and gas as well.
Drama.
Yeah, there's a really interesting op-ed in the Stillwater News today about it that says, like, hey, listen, if these are all sovereign entities, they should be allowed to negotiate their own compacts, right? They don't. Why are we trying to force them into Model 1 from before? So I think just there's like, I mean, that really is international politics that just happens to be in our own backyard. I think this is all very fascinating, very fascinating. All right, well, is there anything else that we didn't cover today that happened this week that we need to talk about? No? I don't know if we mentioned it, but S&P said that Oklahoma's bond rating is probably going to drop. It's like they were a 1 in 3 chance of it dropping.
Yeah, there was
lots of entities are having their bond ratings lowered, but
we talked about it only briefly. So the bill this was 1102, I think. I can't keep them all straight. This was
they're moving so fast.
This was the Senate bill that essentially would the Department of Health was trying to propagate a new rule that says if you would like an exemption to vaccines, a non-medical vaccine exemption, before you can be granted the exemption, you have to sit and watch like a 15-minute presentation on the science and evidence behind the safety and effectiveness of vaccines. That passed the House, I want to say like 6629, I think, something like that. 6629-28, after a lengthy and spirited debate that was largely not factually based in any way, at least on the side of Representative Gann, who was carrying the bill. However, I believe that bill is not going to be heard in the Senate, is my understanding. So that did pass the House, but I think it's dead.
Interesting.
Well, and it's another reminder for our viewers. I was going to say listeners, but now viewers, to continue to follow the legislature and follow organizations or news sources that you rely on, because things are moving so rapidly. Before we started the podcast, Andy, we were talking about the Constitutional Convention bill and how the language was gutted to say something completely different. And so things are changing and moving so fast that it's important to follow those sources that you trust so that you can continue staying in conversation with lawmakers about what you want to see and what you don't want them to do.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I was going to mention that bill. So that was Senate Joint Resolution 31. And we've been watching it since it was filed back in January because that's potentially a big deal, right?
Yeah.
So originally, and it started in the Senate and it passed the Senate and went to the House, and then was moved direct to calendar. And so we all thought they are fast tracking this bill, and the bill would become a state question and be referred to a vote of the people for us, the voters, to say whether or not we wanted the legislature to convene a constitutional convention. That convention then would be empowered to change, amend, restrict, whatever, any part of the state constitution, or propose an entirely new state constitution. However, whatever they come up with out of that would then also have to be approved by a vote of the people. So I think there's a pretty high bar. But yeah, so it was direct to calendar. And then it passed yesterday, and Bailey sent me a message and just said, SJR 31 passed the House. And I was like, holy cow. And so I texted some friends and said, I guess we're going to have a constitutional convention. And then late last night, I was looking at it and realized that just a few minutes before they voted on it, they did a floor substitute and replaced all the language in the bill. And now it's like a bill to do with property tax exemptions for certain manufacturing facilities that would begin January 1st of 2023.
Government is a beautiful
thing. Couldn't be more different, right? Like, and
they just needed a vehicle, so
I guess
they just grabbed that bill.
Or they just wanted to freak us out. Maybe they're messing with us. Maybe now let's go back to the Senate to be voted on or not.
One thing that is, I think, as to bring up as we are finishing here, I believe that both houses are scheduled to finish up all their work today, right? Like they're gonna hear all the bills today, then they're gonna adjourn, but they are not going to officially adjourn sine die, like ending the session. Like, and the reason is if they do that, right? Like, so if they finish their work today, but then they don't adjourn sine die, then the governor has a 5-day deadline to decide whether he's going to sign it. If they were to adjourn sine die, he would have 15 days. And this way, if the governor was to veto a bill, they have plenty of time to come back and attempt to veto override if it's something they, consider tremendously consequential, like, taking away the power of municipalities to declare emergencies and things like that. They could come back.
And they're also still in a special session because they have the governor's CHIPA powers still granted. So they would have to come back and decide if they wanted to grant the governor another month of those extended powers.
Right. That's exactly right. It'll just keep going. Right now, as we wrap this up, at nearly 4:00 on Friday, the House is debating a funding bill for Medicaid. So it's like, these are super important bills that they are still working on. And they were up there late till 11 o'clock or so this week, some nights. And so if you are at home, as we all are, right, and you ever want to watch legislature, you can go to oklegislature.gov, okhouse.gov, oksenate.gov, and watch their live streams. It's moderately interesting. Sometimes it's really interesting.
Sometimes really interesting.
Yeah. And I think it gives you a feeling for how some of them are. Today I was watching earlier in the House it was this morning actually. The House was saying goodbye to some of their members who are terming out. So like
Senator Stanislawski.
Yeah. Representatives Mike Sanders. And so they kind of get a chance to say a few things. And it is, I think it is a sign of respect that they let them go first and get that kind of stuff out of the way before they get to the business of legislating. But
you get to see them put 80 million pieces of paper on the member's desk as a final parting gift.
That's right. All the bills from this year. All right. Well, as we wind down, I do want to thank both of you first of all for joining us today. Thank you, Bailey, for being here.
Would never miss it.
Yeah.
Scott, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
I also want to remind everyone that I'll put up in the corner here a little icon for CivicsCon. 2 weeks from today, we will not be doing a live stream podcast. We will be doing a live stream of CivicsCon coming on May 29th. It is a one-day live stream event where we are going to talk about a bunch of stuff dealing with civics. You can go to civicscon.com and check it out. It's going to be super fun. We're going to talk about open primaries, ranked choice voting, independent redistricting, anti-gerrymandering, voter registration, kind of all these things. You're going to have national level guests, the CEOs of Open Primaries, Vote.org, of the Vote at Home Coalition, the Ranked Choice Voting Coalition of Maine, lots of stuff. It's going to be super exciting. So on that note, we're going to wrap up. Don't forget to subscribe to Let's Pod This on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, wherever it is, Overcast, whatever podcast app you use. You can certainly find us there. Let's Pod This is a member of the Mostly Harmless Media Network, based right here in Oklahoma City. You can follow Scott and Effie on Twitter. If I add them back real quick, you can see their Twitter handles at the bottom. What'd I say?
Effie.
Effie. Sorry. Shout out to Effie Craven, who is one of our good listeners, and got to see her last night. We did civics trivia for Generation Citizen on Zoom, and got to see Effie and actually her husband just texted me.
Also, one bit of news that is important. I don't think we mentioned. This is news. It just happened. The COLA, cost of living adjustment for retirees, has officially passed both houses and goes to the legislature. So for the first time in a dozen years, the Oklahoma retirees are going to get a cost of living adjustment for their pension. So that's
and this has been a long time coming. They've been working on it for a long time.
Yeah, this is really good.
Right on. Good job, legislature.
That's a good place to end.
Way to end on a positive note, Scott.
You did one good thing and a million horrible ones, but the good thing was really important.
All right, well, Let's Fix This is a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization. We want to educate and equip you to be more civically engaged and to build relationships with your neighbors and your elected officials and maybe make politics and government a little bit better right here in Oklahoma. We encourage you to get involved in any way you can. And remember, decisions are made by those who show up. Have a great week, everybody.